Right, so thanks for joining us today. My name's Jack from Box Nutrition and Performance and also run PacePal. And what we're going to do today is just really go through how the process that we use to guarantee your pacing zones are correct. And ultimately, it's going to help with your training and also your running so you become a better runner. Now, we do something called metabolic testing, so VO₂max and lactate testing. And the idea with this is we use it for a lot of reasons, but the main reason why people come in is that they're not really sure about their training zones. And we can do that. We can find their heart rate training zones, their pace zones, but I think also we can see how good they are as a runner, what they might need to improve, but most importantly, give them a clear plan to go away with to make sure that they are going to see some change in their running. So the key thing really is that often people don't know their zones, and the reason for this is that using, say, things like Garmin, Runner, even Chorus as well, is that we're often going to be using algorithms and formulas, not your direct physiology. And with this comes a degree of error. And although it might not seem that important to some people, some of us slightly older runners potentially, we want to get the most from our training. And even though we are those recreational runners, we want to do what we can to make sure what we do is going to be as accurate as possible, and ultimately it's going to help us with our training and racing as well. That's the reason why kind of zones are really important. And again, one of the reasons, the problems we see is that people, when they come in, is just they're clearly running. I'm sure you've heard this. Their easy runs have run too fast. Even though the feel is, and this is another problem with RPE or feel, is that definitely it's incredibly useful metric, RPE or feel. However, someone's easy often isn't actually easy when we measure it correctly. And then the other thing as well is that hard sessions often miss the mark. So you don't really know your threshold, you don't know your speed at VO₂max, and for that you just get this weird kind of merging of hard sessions, which might not be quite hard enough, or it might be too hard when you're looking just to pull back on, say, something like your tempo and your threshold work. And because of this, just progress becomes unpredictable. And then it might seem really good, and then all of a sudden, without knowing it, you're creating this unnecessary fatigue, and that's really going to lead to burnout or injury as well. So it's just kind of, we don't want that to happen. And the reason why we plateau is that thing is with running, I think the ultimate aim, is to build more volume and more intensity. And the kind of the makeup of that is going to be a lot to do with kind of your fitness. And there's lots of ways to do that. However, the problem is, say, doing it the wrong way, the chance of you plateauing and getting injured is a lot higher. And the idea of what we're trying to do is just basically not eliminate it. We can never eliminate that, unfortunately, with running, but definitely vastly kind of reduce the chances. The second one as well is also the key, I guess, premise behind what we do is really built around this red line, this threshold. And when people aren't really unsure about, firstly, kind of what threshold is, but also kind of where it actually sits in terms of their physiology, so the intensity, the pace, the heart rate, this gets misjudged, the training gets misjudged, and this ultimately is not going to help them improve with their running. Also, as well, it's kind of knowing when to adapt their pace and zones. The problem with just having a set of zones, Garmin do adapt it, Runner adapts it, but the problem with Runner is that often if you complete paces, they'll push you to go further. And the issue with that is you're going to get faster and faster and faster, whereas sometimes you need to be able to kind of put a lid on it. And you've probably seen recently the issue we've had with a lot of people getting stress fractures using things like Runner. And we need to know that we do have paces, but we also need to know that when is the right time to retest? When are we going to stay like testing that threshold, testing that kind of zone 2 with maybe a drift test? And then finally as well, did that feel how it should? Often we say, oh, it felt easy. Did it? What does threshold meant to feel like? What does a VO₂max session meant to feel like? Should you be completely dying at the end? Should there be room in the tank for one more effort? We need to understand this. So what do you actually need? We said about kind of what causes a lot of these plateaus, and what we use is just simple kind of guardrails or anchors. And although there's a lot of jargon, I use a lot of jargon when it comes to running, we really just kind of keep, we're looking to focus on a few key things. The first one is just making sure that easy days stay easy. The second thing is making sure that, again, hard days are hard enough. And when I say hard enough, it's that if it's a tempo or threshold, are you kind of putting a limiter on it? When it's, say, like a VO₂max, a speed session, are we making sure we're letting ourselves go even harder? And it's just kind of knowing what the adaptation we're looking for each of the sessions. And from this as well, that should enable us to recover properly. Are we kind of guardrailing our key sessions? Are we giving ourselves that time to adapt? Remember, the adaptation happens when we recover. And then finally, from this, when we kind of getting that kind of good, perfect mix, that mix of, say, intensity, volume, recovery, this is when we're going to see that fitness building. And the way that we do that is by using these three anchors. And this is what our system really is built upon. Rather than just kind of zoning off one key metric, we do it off three. And by doing that, it makes it far more accurate. And this is going to give you better results. And the three kind of metrics we're looking for is, first one is our LT1. And this is just imagine you're creating this fitness pyramid where the bigger the pyramid, the better. And to build this big pyramid, we need to start with the base, the floor, the foundations. And this is coming from measuring your LT1 or your first threshold. And once we've got our lactate threshold, and this just signifies where things begin to get challenging. And once we know that, we know that if we can build fitness or more volume below that point, we can do more and more and more without the subsequent fatigue. So that's where we get our the base of your fitness from. Once you've got that, we're looking for something called your red line. And I'm not going to turn this into a science lesson today, but just so you've got an understanding of what we're looking to do. This is your second threshold. This is your critical speed. This is the point where it acts as a go-between where things are sustainable compared to when they're not. If you stay just below this red line, you're going to be able to hold this for a given amount of time, really. So normally that 40 to 60 minutes, so you can hold that pace, that heart rate where things aren't going to go too mad, I think 10K efforts. Whereas as soon as you start kind of pushing that a little bit too far above that, things blow up. You go into this red zone, you go into this kind of death zone if you kind of follow any mountaineering. So once you've got this is one of the critical speed, well, it's critical speed because this is what that threshold of speed is. However, this is critical in the way that we use this model is because it helps us calculate your training zones or kind of anchor your training zones, should I say. It gives a really good understanding of kind of race predictions and it really unlocks performance as well. Next up is our ceiling or VO₂max. Again, I'm sure you've heard of this, and you need to see this as almost at the top of that pyramid. And the idea is to pull that pyramid up with some VO₂max work, which is going to give that pyramid some size, really. However, we can't just focus on that, because if you just did VO₂max or hard effort, you'd have this like thin little tower where you haven't got that support. So this acts as your max aerobic capacity. And what we really need to see, though, what's really important, is the proximity of where your VO₂max is compared to your threshold, compared to your LT1. So it's not just about one of these markers, it's about all three of them and how close they are to one another. And what I mean by that is that we often have athletes come in who've got a very similar VO₂max. So let's say two athletes come in, they've got a VO₂max of say 50, 55. However, they both have very different 10K or half marathon times, or say 5K times. So why is that? There's a few different reasons, but a lot of the time it's how close their red line or their threshold is to their VO₂max. And once we start understanding this, once we start understanding the proximity of, say, your LT1, your threshold to your VO₂max, we can start understanding where we need to improve. So just a few things that say might come into this is like your running economy. How costly or how expensive is your running? How much energy are you needing to use to run at a given speed? If you have to use a lot less energy, you're going to go for longer. So even with having, say, a similar VO₂max, you're probably going to get a better half marathon time. Again, things like durability. It's like, how long can you hold a given speed? So some people might have a similar threshold speed. One person might hold that for, say, 30 minutes. Another person might be able to hold that for 55 minutes. Again, that's going to have a big impact on your performance. So I know I've started giving you a bit of that jargon now, but what I want to start thinking about is once we can start identifying these key metrics, so your ceiling, your VO₂max, your floor with your LT1, and your threshold or your critical speed, your LT2, we can then really start understanding, one, how to zone correctly, but also help you understand where you need to improve. So how do you actually measure this? Now, there's a few different ways. However, what I want to talk about today is the kind of the key way that we do it, and that's through lab testing. So we do something called VO2 testing. I don't know where that image has gone. I'll show you in a moment. And we do the VO₂max testing to measure your ceiling, so how much oxygen you can actually use, and also the speed or the velocity at VO₂max. That's probably more important than the actual VO2 number itself. What we can also do is find your thresholds. Now, there's different ways you can find your thresholds. The first one is just through VO2, so you can look for ventilatory thresholds. And from that, we're just looking for the first marker, the LT1, the VT1, where you've seen that initial jump in lactate or ventilation. That shows you where your zone 2 is. We're looking for your second threshold, where you start seeing an exponential rise. And with this as well, this is where your LT2 or the top of your zone 4 is. And the reason why we offer the lactate is for those people who are more interested in paces, not just heart rate zones. This is probably more accurate, well, it is more accurate in determining your pace zones because it's a long stage test. So from that, we can identify your aerobic threshold, your LT1. We can also identify your second threshold or your LT2, and that's going to give us that full picture on how we can give you that complete zones for personally for you. Now, with that, this just stops the guesswork essentially, and this gives you those proper pacing and heart rate zones. So what we do is that we're really quite lucky that we've managed to develop a software where we can take the data from physiological testing or field testing, and we can plug it into this kind of software. We're able to get your heart rate zones, your pace zones, and you can see them down here. We're also looking for those key metrics that we spoke about. So speed at VO₂max, critical speed, LT1 speed, your max heart rate. We're looking for the proximity of how close they all are to one another, and this is going to help identify limiters where you need to improve. And the great thing about this as well is that it takes that, again, data, and rather than make it complicated, we can just take that, put it into the software, and it's going to give you your sessions, one based off you, okay, which is great, but also we can just say, right, what are you training for? Where are we in the season? If you've got 12 weeks, 6 weeks, 4 weeks, and then we can say, right, these are the sessions you need to do for the next 4 weeks. So it makes it incredibly powerful where we've got that data, accurate data, and most importantly, we can get you those sessions as well. And this just gives you that confidence. You're not going to have to worry about guessing your zones. You know that kind of the pacing that you're running is going to be right for you, and ultimately that's going to make you a better runner. So if you are interested, what we're going to be doing is we're offering the VO₂max test. If you want to do lactate, you can pay a little bit more. And with this, like I mentioned, you're going to get those heart rate training zones. You're going to get the 4-week block, and we're going to help you do that. And with the special offer that we've got, okay, it's only going to be limited slots until the end of the month. So if you do want to kind of get booked onto that, make sure you do kind of click below, get booked in, or if you're not too sure, just book a call with me, and I'm happy to go through everything. And if you did want me to quickly go through, quickly show you, so this is just an example client where we're able to take the data from the test, like I said. You can, so velocity of VO₂max, heart rate at different thresholds, speeds, and then from that, we can populate your dashboard. You're going to get your key markers. Again, I forgot to pop that one in. Let's say 90. And from that, you're going to get your full training zones. So your zone 2, zone 3, zone 4. And then you can also add in efforts over time as well. So you can do a 3, a 6, a 12-minute time trials to help with critical speed. You can do 5K time trials, and that can just realign your zones moving forward. We can start testing how you stack up compared to where you should be. We can identify limiters, and we can create a fueling plan, a strength plan, a weekly fueling plan as well, or geared towards your zones. But most importantly, we can start kind of adding training sessions. Now, with this as well, we use like a more Canova-esque periodization model where first we're looking to build that floor. Imagine the pyramid. So if we go back to that pyramid, you're looking to build the floor, then you're looking to develop the threshold, and then after that we're looking to express the engine. And what that means is we become a lot more specific in terms of kind of what you're racing towards. So for example, it's a 5K, you do a lot of 5K pace work, VO₂max work, but either way it's going to align to your goal. So what you could just do is you would choose what you're working towards, choose kind of the block that you're working at, you'll generate your block. It will be based off your critical speed. You would add it to your calendar, and you're going to have those sessions there. And the great things with this as well, it's you can export to your Garmin, you can do it with your Apple Watch with something called Intervals ICU. You can follow along, you can pull it back in with Strava, and you can kind of look at your data and keep kind of working from there. So try the test. If you didn't want to do the testing, try RPP, see how you get on. But any other questions, let me know, and hopefully I'll see you in the near future.